Hi, everybody. My name is Tom, and I'm one of the producers of the Better Innovation podcast. Last time we brought you part one of a great interview between Jeff and Dr. Tommy Weir. They spoke about leadership. In part two of the interview, Jeff and Tommy focus on how AI can help leaders and employers to become the best that they can be. If you haven't listened to part one yet, I encourage you to go back and do so. But for now, here's part two of the interview.
Was there an early period of experimentation? I think about sitting here today. Every day we are all about experimentation with AI, trying to solve new problems, the science of applying this powerful tool to real problems that are in business today. Was that the purpose of your lab, to find that application, like what you saw with the insurance company in Tokyo? Were you trying to find the application within leadership?
As you know, I had this kind of wrestling fascination in the back of my head, and my first real experiment with AI happened before the leadership lab. I decided that I would learn to code TensorFlow. Now, my goal in coding TensorFlow was that I was going to teach my computer, or my computer was actually going to learn, would be a better way to state this. My computer was going to learn how I write so it could write books for me. So instead of writing a book about every 3 years, I thought, I could tell it the topic, it could do the research, it could write the first draft, and I could produce a book every year. This was my goal.
That's a nice objective. You could just hang out on the beach.
You got it. Obviously, given the fact that we're talking today on something else, I failed miserably at that attempt. But attempting to learn is probably the better word, how to code in TensorFlow.
You rolled up your sleeves. You weren't just reading about it, but you were applying it. You were experimenting.
I hired a tutor to work side by side with me to teach me. And in the midst of that, I learned about things like algorithms or an AI, and that there's libraries of them, things that would be basic for people who are around AI. But I began to realize for executives, we actually don't know what's inside that term. And it's a very mysterious veil that goes on, and not knowing what's in it, had I not gotten on the other side of the veil, the next part of this conversation could have never happened.
I'm so interested to know, Tommy, if there were some problems that were in your head that, as a leadership consultant, somebody who was consumed with what you did and your profession and how you were helping leaders, was there something about the problems that you saw leaders that were facing that today's tools weren't particularly effective at solving? Were you looking for a solution to a particular problem?
No, at this particular point, I really was a bit too selfish of my focus with it. So my curiosity was saying, how could this work broadly? Individually, I was saying, wow, this would be great to be able to write books. And then one of the companies that we work with, the CEO says to me, he says, hey, what should we do about our productivity problem? Our rate of productivity growth is flat. And I looked at him and I said, you should build a productivity engine. And he said, yeah, that's great. And I said, you should use AI in it. Now, mind you, when I said this, I was learning to code TensorFlow, so I was on the other side of the veil. And he looks at me and he says, yeah, that's good, do it. And I said, I'm sorry, but we do leadership. He said, yeah, I know, but do it. And one of those awkward moments of a pause and a stare, and he goes, you'll figure it out. And at that moment, I kind of walked away and I thought,
so there's the problem. So the problem is in front of you.
no, I actually thought we have no business doing this.
You've never done it before.
We're not an AI company. I don't know where to get a data scientist from. My experimentation in AI is not going well personally.
You're still writing books.
Yeah, absolutely, like with pen and paper nearly. Like, I kind of looking at that and I'm like, this isn't going well. And then I thought, why not? What's the worst case that happens?
So you were alone, so you had no computer scientists, and you had a problem, you had a client with a problem. And what did you do next?
I kind of got this rough idea how much it would cost. We talked to a few companies that do AI. They gave us their price, their budget, and I happened to read the Financial Times on a Saturday.
What did you read that day?
I read the cost, the salaries of data scientists. So I'm looking on one side, companies that do AI saying it's going to cost you X amount of money. And on the other side, I'm reading, I can hire a data scientist for X. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're making money on this. Let's try.
So maybe there's a business here.
Nope. Cheapest way to deliver a project. I'm not even near a business yet.
You wanted to solve this problem.
I wanted to solve his problem.
Got it.
Nothing else. So we agreed to price. I went out and hired data scientists, had enough knowledge to know what type of data scientist to hire. And then that starts going on. I'm running my mouth and telling one of the other CEOs that I work with a little bit of what we're doing roughly. They said, we want it. That's when I said, wait a minute, maybe we have a business.
And where did you start with that particular problem? And I'm just so interested to know when you had a problem in front of you and you found, notwithstanding your TensorFlow skills, you went out and you found some data scientists, computer scientists. I can only imagine the first time you got them in a room, and the reason I'm asking, I'm thinking of the work that we do here. We have new problems come in literally every day, and we convene the scientists. Then when you did that, what happened next?
So we sat down and there were some design constructs that we put in the room. Number one, we said we want to work with data that companies have. We will not ask this company or anybody ever to collect new data, because if we do, it's done. So what data do they have? And then we looked through and we said the data that we were looking for would largely be data that has a timestamp series inside of it. Okay, that the system can be timestamping it. It doesn't need to be a human timestamped. And then we said we want data that represents what employees do. What systems do they touch in a day? So this would be your ERP systems, and I'm not supposed to say brand names, right? So ERP systems, this would be the CRM, this would be the metadata from email, not the content, it would be the calendar, it would be industry specific, so like a patient management system, a POS in retail, government systems that are going on. So all of this data is sitting there. Your day is recorded in data, but we don't really think about it or know it. One of the things that I have found fascinating is sitting with executives and even their own skepticism that they have data. No, we don't have data. And they don't think they have data because they didn't punch it in something.
Or they can't see it on the balance sheet.
Exactly.
It's not a definable asset still in many companies. But I wonder why at the time did you feel that seeking new data was a bridge too far? You mentioned that very quickly, that you wanted to start with, and I don't want to lose that moment, the point that you raised about that you want to start with existing data, because there's a lot of startups at that time. This was what, 2017-ish?
We are late 17 heading into early 18.
So
early 18, really.
So early 2018, there were a lot of startups that were creating new data with devices that measured people's interactions. And I'm just really fascinated with the fact that you went a different route. You wanted to start with existing data streams. I can see the practicality. Was there something more than just that's a great place to start? Or it seems more purposeful than that?
I had got invited to an event. There's a lot of events that are coinciding, that are happening on top of each other. And there was a startup in the room. It was the fastest startup. It's the fastest company ever to hit 2 billion in valuation at that time. That's since been surpassed. And they do productivity of machines. Okay, so we're kind of looking at the same problem. We're looking at a human side. They're looking at the machine side, so physical asset machines. And as I was listening to the CEO speak, he said, we knew that if we had asked companies to collect new data, like to put new sensors on, that would become a problem. And that would slow down the buying, so now all of a sudden we have to determine, can we buy that? And I thought that was a really good insight. The other is, he said, we looked for data scientists that like dirty, incomplete data, because the data's never academically perfect.
And I love it reminds me of the quote, I did the best I could with what I had, famous quote by the heavyweight Joe Louis. 12 undefeated years as a boxing champ. I always love that quote, do the best with what you have. Sounds like maybe there was a bit of that in your story. You had it here with companies. Why not start there and see what insights we could derive from data?
Absolutely.
Let's go back to the project. So I'm dying to know. So what happens with that project? What insights did you glean from the data in this inaugural project that you had?
Oh gosh, I could go on forever on this. And we see it across another. So one of the pieces we walked in the room with was this understanding that companies pay for 8 hours a day and they get about 3 hours of productive time a day. So this has come out of popular survey work has gone on by a number of companies. It's in academic literature, so I already knew that. And Jeff, you'll never believe this. It comes out in the data. I think my jaw literally dropped when I began to see that in a normal 8-hour workday, about 3 hours of productive time in it. and the validation that it gave to other pieces that were far more opinion based, to see it in data, that just really, that shocked me.
Did you learn what was happening the other 5 hours of the day? Or was it less relevant?
It's less relevant because it's, I mean, you could speculate people are playing on Instagram and other stuff that they're doing.
Or inefficiencies in transition of work, right? I would imagine you've got 10 projects, and just the transition time from project to project, you certainly lose productivity. There's lots of reasons why somebody may not be.
Yeah, there's
productive.
a couple. I'll throw a couple of big things out, and it's going to set up a kind of a real salient point in understanding it. One is it takes about 2 hours to hit a productivity peak from the start of a day. So somebody shows up at 8 o'clock in the morning, they begin to hit their productivity peak around 10. When I saw it, it confirmed what I didn't want to know.
It's measured. This is fact-based. This is not Tommy's opinion. This is fact-based. The data, the insights from the data was telling you that not only 3 hours a day, but you could measure the peak time, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. So what we're seeing is person after person after person into the thousands, and we're seeing, and each of these that you're looking at there's a current 6-month window you're looking at, and you could see kind of here they are starting at a 0.0, and they get up to their peak, which the peak's not real high, but we don't need to focus on it. I had hoped that people showed up to work in the morning and they hit their peak like in minutes, stayed at it till they took a break, dropped. So it was kind of like really crisp 90-degree turns in it.
Instead, I'm sure there's some bell curve to it, I would imagine.
So kind of slow build up, they hit it, then you can see lunch is super clear. Okay, everything stops. But it's interesting, after lunch, there isn't a build up, it goes straight to the top. So in the morning, it takes 2 hours to hit peak. After lunch, they can hit it in 5 to 10 minutes.
And then at some point there's a crash.
And then it starts
on the
down,
other
and the other end of the day kind of looks like the beginning, but it's about 45-minute truncation at the end of the day.
So what do you do with that data? So now you know that it's truncated, and frankly, employers aren't getting a lot they're paying for an 8-hour worker day. So what do you do with that data?
Usually when we're brought in, we're a bit selective who we work with. And we like CEOs that are very, I guess I would say, that they're equally fascinated with the role that AI can play in helping their organization, and specifically helping the human part of it become the best they can. And that's a really critical component of who we are. We don't want to replace workers. We're not on the automation side of it. We're looking and saying there's always going to be a human worker, but how can AI help that human worker become their best? How can it help the leader become their best they can?
And you had in your client, in the leader, or the person who hired you for that particular question, that it seems like they had a keen interest in helping their people. And also, and we find this too in the companies that we work with, that there is a great interest as we sit here today in September of 2019. There's a great interest in what data do I have in my organization that could be valuable, because most companies probably haven't figured out a way to tap that yet. And so maybe there's a curiosity there. Is that fair?
It's really, no, there's a skepticism. There's not even a curiosity.
A skepticism that they're skeptical that they have data that could lead to great insights.
Absolutely.
So less curiosity, more, I'll see you when you prove it to me.
So it's a dichotomy. I'm super fascinated. I'm describing a CEO, not
Yes.
me. So I'm super fascinated with this idea that AI is going to show up in the workplace. So there's curiosity there. And then there's a skepticism, if it can show up in my workplace, but do I have data? And then I'm going, but how much do you spend per month in your cloud storage bill? What do you think you're storing? Sorry, this sounds very skeptical.
There's
like
something there. So there's
patronizing,
something,
but yeah, if you think about the storage space that you have, that's data. And it's realizing that the data exists. The data doesn't need to be textbook perfect. It's data. Start using it.
It's also, I think, just another great reminder that we are in the infancy of understanding the data that may be within an organization, and the path from the data, as you mentioned, I love how you describe it, what do you think you're paying for that's actually in the cloud, but to extend from the data that you have, that stuff, the collection of data, to actually going from data to insights to improving a problem or improving a situation that you have. Most leaders haven't seen that path before. So, of course, they're a little skeptical.
Yeah. Now, this gets to one of those things that I'm really energized with. Is we were looking at it, going back to that point of saying, on one side, so we want to use data that's there. We know that the data is not in perfect form. We get the data. What are we going to do with it? So we wrote our own algorithms, and we've done several things that are first in the area of artificial intelligence. But on a practical side, coming outside of what's behind that shell, is we came up with a standardized productivity score. So any employee in a company can be measured equally on their productivity. So it's a score from 0 to 100. It's got 3 component parts: capacity utilization, answering how well do you use your time in a day, and there's some interesting things in there. Consistency, so can I depend on you, or do you change from time to time? And quality impact, which is answering, are others more or less productive as a result of you? What's your overall impact on productivity, not just yourself? And that particular score of having it standardized has been a breakaway area, because what it's done is all of a sudden a company that can take this. Productivity is historically been a macro term. We think about it, at the company level, at an economic level. We talk about it at a human level.
I think about it, that's interesting how you said that. I think of productivity as an organization for a leader looking at the workforce, but then I can also bring it down to the individual, and productivity is the collection of what the individuals can do. And we've talked about your score, this proprietary score in the past, and what I'm so curious about is that you've added this dimension of that as part of your productivity is the impact on others' productivity. Right?
Absolutely.
That there's an integration of the humans that I'm not quite sure others have recognized as much as maybe they would aggregate, right, all of the individuals. But you specifically looked at the data to tell you you've got 5 employees. How does employee number 1 improve, or perhaps even make worse somehow the activities of employee number 3? Do I
Absolutely.
have that right?
You've got that perfectly clear. If I am an approver in a process, okay, to use kind of a simple aspect.
Yeah.
So I could be in an ERP system and I need to simply approve an expense to be paid. Just very simple activity. But I do it once a week. I slowed everybody's work down.
There's a log jam.
I create the log jam until I want to go in. A very simple
That's a big idea. So to figure out a way with an AI system to measure, not just that, and I think inherently we see this in organizations, we see this in teams. You can have somebody on a team that it could be, I wouldn't call the example you gave destructive behavior, but you could have somebody on a team of 100 people, one person, whether it's through personal interactions or just blocking a flow, that the results could be incredible, either positive or negative.
Absolutely. And we look at one of our breakthrough areas is the ability to go from correlation to causation. And in employee data, this is a true breakthrough area. Beginning to look into say, you know what? When John shows up on any team John has shown up on, we actually now can quantify the team's better. Or maybe when John shows up, the team's not better. You can see after everybody else's work, it takes 10 minutes to do X. After Tommy's, it takes 20 because his work is full of error. We're not looking at the quality of the work, we're looking at the impact of the quality of the work, which is a much bigger area because that's what really matters.
Once you have that insight, I don't mean to minimize this, and I hope it doesn't sound that, once you have the insight, perhaps the remediation doesn't become overly complicated. So once
Agreed.
Your customer, your client knows that this is the problem. I've got 6 people on my team of 100 where there seems like there's something going on. 3 of them are doing amazingly positive things, and 3 others perhaps are blocking workflows. The remediation, any great leader would know, okay, I know what to do. I know where to go. Is that fair?
Absolutely. So one of the areas is we have a recommendation engine. So typically, it's very similar to what you would have if you were shopping and a retailer did it, if you were watching TV and the recommendations.
If you like this, you may like that.
Absolutely. So our recommendation engine begins to look through and identifies the areas, where's productivity impact going to come from? And all of a sudden it would say, you know what? You should actually help these guys hit peak earlier in the day. It's kind of obvious if you look at the data, but I've never been able to see the data. I've never had a score at my hands before as a leader. So when I can start to see the score, but Jeff, I have to tell you something that's really interesting, and there's a huge debate that goes on around this, and it says, yeah, but I'm an employee, do I really want my company to see my data? Do I really want them to know this? Do I want them to see it? And what we have found with the score is, it actually creates a transparent conversation and removes bias.
It becomes a fact-based determination, because what were leaders doing before? Here, in your case, they're using an AI system, they're using the insights from their data, they're sticking their thumb in the wind, and they have intuition. And not to say that an AI system is going to replace all leadership intuition. I'm sure that you're not saying that, but it's another tool for them. Perhaps the employee in your example would appreciate a fact-based approach.
We would say that it levels the playing field. It's like a core of a building.
You could debate it. They could debate whether, and perhaps that there's extenuating circumstances. The data
Absolutely.
is right. I'm sure you've seen that in your work, that getting to the remediation is not always easy, but it's a place to start, isn't it?
So if you find, I don't know, we'll use this proverbial John. John spends 10x more time in meetings than everybody else. The recommendations in enAIble, coming from the leadership recommender inside of it, would not say John's doing bad for spending 10x. It would say, hey, John spends 10x, should he be?
And for the benefit of our listening audience, enAIble is the name of the company that you founded. So you founded a company called enAIble to implement and to work with customers to improve their leadership. That's the name of your company.
Absolutely. So enAIble. So AI enabling leaders to become the best they can.
I love it. And what year did you find enAIble?
A year ago, 2018.
And tell us a bit about the results that you're finding. So that is such a great example. I'm glad you went through example of how you could use AI in that particular situation. On average, and the way that you measure productivity gains, the companies that you work with will realize a benefit. Is it low, medium, high, or how do you measure what's an effective company in achieving results from this program?
I've never thought about it as low, medium, high, but as you say that, I would say it would be classified on the high side. So all of the companies we've worked with thus far are enAIble has put on the table where there's 30+% opportunities for productivity growth, and the recommendations are coming to help the leaders achieve that now.
That's amazing. So to make sure the audience understands that, that's incredible. 30% productivity gains, and I just wonder, and we haven't gone deep into these particular tools, but the piece of it that could be so impactful is that you're looking at not just the individual productivity, but the implications for others. And intuitively, it just seems to me, Tommy, that, and I don't know if you can segment the portion of the gains that result from your work, but that aspect I do find could be quite impactful. Is that right?
The impact of?
The impact of an employee and what he or she does every day and how it impacts others' performance. Because now you're talking about an exponential effect, rather than that if you have a team of 100 and employee number 32 doing great things to affect their performance, or perhaps they're not overly productive, but how they impact others' performance seems like that's where you could have exponential gains.
Yes, you can have exponential gains there. I think there's some other exponential gain opportunities. So if you said, hey, Tommy, here's a whiteboard, let's scribble out, what do you see as other opportunities inside here? And one of the pieces that I really like is the transition from busyness to productivity. Now, if we walked out, and we're just going to assume your team's super productive, so let's don't go with your team.
The door's closed. Who knows what's happening on the other side of the door?
Hold on, time out. I'm going to pick up on that. You literally just qualified what's going on. You don't know.
You don't know. That's right. You trust.
So how many meetings have you been in today?
Oh, too many. Probably 7, 8.
Okay. And in between that, what were you doing?
I was traveling.
Today.
Today. So I was shuttling between offices. I was catching up on email. I was trying to squeeze a phone call in. I was thinking about how behind I'm getting in the production of things that I need to do and trying to stay ahead of the game.
Now, I'm not picking on you, but can
Please.
I push a bit?
Please, yes.
This is really interesting. You described your activity, you didn't describe your team's.
Yes.
You described your production, you didn't describe theirs.
Yes.
Kind of if you begin to look at it. But what you described is really normal. Your answer would be quite normal. I was in meetings, I was getting behind on the things I need to do, I was doing email, and all of a sudden, at least 60% of your time is spent in administrative task.
Yeah, the nature of how I think about productivity was what my own as one person can do, not as implications for the team.
So if we begin to back up on this and look at it, you actually are accountable for hours that EY organization has procured.
Yes.
I should be very careful how I'm going to say this, has procured. And if I look at it, if I'm a company of 3,000 employees, if I've got roughly about 5 million hours I procured a year.
It's a lot of time.
And then the question is, how do I use those the best? And what we find is, at the end of the day, most employees will say, yeah, I was really busy, but I wasn't productive. And what we're sitting in the room at enAIble's doing is helping to shift that to the productive side, because going back to one of those exponential gains, when I'm busy and not productive, my engagement goes down, my motivation goes down. I don't want to just be busy. I want to make a difference. I want to be productive. And you have too much on your plate to really allow you to do everything you can do as a leader.
And dare I say that the next generation, whether it's, for example, look to Generation Z, may be extremely focused on purpose-driven leadership and
Absolutely.
And what can I do every day? Not to ignore how purposeful other generations may be, but we feel it. We feel like, as we can easily say, the next generation is pushing us as leaders to be more purpose-driven.
Absolutely. I just kind of, as odd as this is, I think of time as a finite resource, and I think this goes back to my 20s and really what drove me into the leadership area. It's a finite resource.
It's a great way to bring it back. I think it's a wonderful way to bring the conversation back to where we started. And I think you really gave a clear picture for the audience of, I think many of the audience won't appreciate before this conversation how AI could improve something like a skill like leadership that seems to some as though it's more qualitative than quantitative. And you've found in the data that there is an opportunity to improve one's leadership through data-driven decisions in these AI systems. And I just want to thank you for that on behalf of the audience. It has been just a wonderful conversation, and I love the work that you're doing within enAIble. And quickly, before we move on, we have some rapid-fire questions we're going to hit at you in a minute. But I promised earlier that we'd come back to Dubai. And what I find really, really interesting about Dubai is one of the few cities that have actually appointed a state minister for artificial intelligence. With your work with Dubai and other organizations, what makes the city of Dubai and government different from others?
So Dubai has been the earliest of adopters of enAIble. They've looked at it and they said, wait a minute, we should be using AI to help our workforce. This is an absolutely critical area. What makes them unique is their eye, Dubai's eye is very much on the future, always. Dubai, as its DNA, is to create an environment where others succeed. I mean, think about it. How many countries have 90% expats? How many countries have, 5 times their population, 6 times their population coming as international tourists? It's an environment for others to succeed.
So it is that constant looking to the future. Not surprising that as a government to focus on, because we know the future of problem solving with technology travels down the path of artificial intelligence.
Absolutely.
We understand that. Tommy, I can't thank you enough. Great conversation. I promise some rapid fire questions.
All right, let's do it.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Now, these are not rehearsed. Many of our guests would like the questions in advance. You are a brave soul. You said, I want to just get it live on air.
You got it.
This is it. Okay. Number one, how do you see AI impacting our personal lives today? Give us some examples of how you use AI to improve your life perhaps as often as a daily basis?
So can I say brand names or just say the concept?
Let's try brand names. Sure.
So I wear a Whoop, WHOOP, and Whoop was originally built, they won't like my description of this, but kind of as a Fitbit for professional athletes. So what Whoop does is every day it tells me the amount of cardiovascular strain that I have and predicts, or actually, I guess, proposes for me the amount that should be in my body based upon my recovery. So it looks at how well I am recovered in the morning. I was quite well recovered today. I was at roughly 80%. I'm in a 5-day streak of being 20% or below. And it gives me my actual sleep ratings, but at a sleep lab level.
Oh,
I don't sleep well, is what Whoop has helped me learn.
And so with that data now, you're looking for ways to improve your recovery, or looking for ways to improve. That's great. Okay, you're off to a great start. Two more. What book is on your nightstand?
Oh gosh, which nightstand? I live between two houses and an airplane
so
and
lots
a
of
variety
nightstands.
of places. So this is really funny. The book that I'm really into right now, I couldn't even tell you the name of it. I just happen to know what it's about. It may be called Inspire. The author's going to hate me for it. But the book is actually about building products that people can truly engage with. So I'm looking at how do we make enAIble to the point to where it becomes a central component of your life and integrates so seamlessly with it that you don't really think about it.
Design-driven product. Is there a design component to that?
Yeah, there's a design component.
How to improve user experience of the product.
And I can tell you what's next on I'm actually more interested in what's next.
Yeah,
in
what's
what I'm
coming
reading.
after that?
So I accidentally, I guess is what you would say, met the author of one of the top video games in the world. And got into this long discussion over drinks about what they do and how do they go about it. And I walked away with an utter fascination of the gaming industry, and not for gamification, but actually looking at how do you do multipliers and streaks and social motivation and how that can come back to play, because inside an enAIble, because what we're looking at is how do you use the score to really drive the engagement, because the score by itself it's super valuable, but I'm after the transformative side. I see a day to where AI is literally helping leaders do things that they've never had the time to do.
Well, and what you're also exemplifying in that example is that it is one of the classic and the best ways to innovate is to look outside of your field, look outside your discipline, bring ideas from someplace else and bring it to what you do. I love it. I've got some books now to read. Very good, Tommy. Last question. You ready?
I'm ready.
Who do you follow on social media?
Who do I follow on social media? I'm very selective in who I follow on social media.
You don't flood your Twitter.
I do not.
box.
I probably follow 150 people on Twitter, and Twitter's the only social media source that I proactively use. LinkedIn is used a lot in my life, but I don't proactively use it. Who do I follow? So I follow the Boston Celtics. That should have come straight off my mouth. Inspirational quotes, Fast Company. You probably want people that I follow. Most of the leaders in the AI space I tend to follow. And the few executives that would really say something. Okay, most don't tweet.
That's great. I like it. Yeah. A place to start. Okay.
And a little bit of news.
Okay. Tommy, thank you so much. Appreciate you taking the time today, coming to the studio. You really offered a lot for our audience. This in season 3, Better Innovation, we're all about artificial intelligence. We're trying to find new ways for clients and listening audience to understand how AI can help them, and you certainly helped us accomplish that today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be with you.
This has been Better Innovation from EY. Let us know what you think about the show by leaving a review or by reaching out to Jeff at jeffrey.saviano@ey.com or find him on Twitter at Jeffrey Saviano. Better Innovation is produced by the great team at Hogarth Worldwide.